Hope Beyond Dreams by Carlos Phil. My story is called Hope Beyond Dreams. It is not a true story, I made it up, but I had help from the inspiration from God, and it is based on true events. It is meant to draw people closer to God, to see how much He loves us, and to give you a better perspective on who God really is, and to see the beauty of being a child of God. The story is about a guy who has lived as a bit of a prodigal son. His life is ruined from his childhood, and as he grows up, the thoughts and memories haunted him, and he almost wanted to die. But when all else failed, God didn't. I hope you enjoy. Have you ever thought your life sucked? Or have you ever wondered why bad things happen to you? You ask, is there even a God? You might want to meet a guy named Daniel Williamson. He has gone through it all. My name is John, Daniel's best friend. First, you should know that Daniel was physically abused when he was only 7 years old. I know. His parents were never meant to have children. After that happened, Daniel was taken away from his parents and put into a foster home where he lived for 3 years and was adopted at age 10. Though his new parents were better, he could never forget about what happened to him in the past. He was never able to have a normal relationship with his parents. When Daniel was in school, he was not the most popular, due to the story of his abuse getting out to the school. We all know how that went. Many fights occurred. I met Daniel in college when he was 20 years old. I seemed to be the only guy to treat him like a brother, despite all the things that have happened to him, and the amount of trouble he's gotten into. I seemed to see something in him. The sad thing was, I never knew what it was, so I just waited to find it. 20 years later, here we are now. Daniel has now started a new job as a truck driver. For years, he has been trying to find answers to his stress and find hope. He wants to forget about what happened to him when he was 7. But unfortunately, being abused is not something you just simply forget. However, he seemed to be enjoying this job. Now, there was a day, a Sunday, when I asked Daniel if he wanted to come to church with me. He awkwardly said to me, "Sure." When he and I arrived, he felt very uncomfortable about being there. He asked me why everybody kept on smiling at him, greeting him, and shaking his hand. During his earlier days, Daniel was not very exposed to good hospitality, or love for that matter, so to see anything like this for the first time seemed strange to him. After we finished worship, the pastor talked about Jesus Christ and what it means to be saved by calling on His name. When the sermon was over, he and I talked. I explained why these people are so happy with God in their lives, but when Daniel heard this, he began to get defensive. He said boldly, "There is no God." I said to him, "You've got to be kidding me." He said to me, "Let me ask you something, John. If there is a God, why was I abused when I was a kid? Why was my childhood so ruined? And why can't I forget about my past? How can a God of love let this happen to me?" After this argument, Daniel went his way home. As he was on his way, I prayed for him. And that very night, he had a bad nightmare about what happened to him when he was 7. The dream was very terrifying, and before he knew it, he found himself oversleeping and was an hour late to work. When he tried to explain everything to his boss, there was no mercy found for him. End result, Daniel was fired from his new job as a truck driver. Suddenly, Daniel was feeling like he was not getting anywhere in life. He simply could not believe what just happened. So Daniel made his way to a bar to have a drink. He wanted to get his mind off of his stress. However, he had a bit too much to drink and made the mistake of getting back into his car. As he was driving home drunk, he was thinking about what John had told him about how people are so happy with God in their lives, and what the pastor said about calling on the name of the Lord. Daniel began to scream, driving carelessly. He then cried out, "Lord, help me!" Suddenly he was approaching an intersection at a high speed and crashed into a car from his right side. But immediately, Daniel started breathing. He felt no pain. He looked at himself and saw no sign of the crash. He was fully intact. He noticed an abundance of light everywhere, until he could not even cast a shadow. There were beautiful voices singing, which could be heard everywhere. There was not a single dead thing anywhere, but everything was full of perfect and beautiful life. He asked, "Where am I?" Then a tall man appeared to him, and he was clothed in a white robe, whiter than snow. Daniel asked him, "Who are you?" He answered, "I am the angel Gabriel, a messenger of God." "Angels are real?" Daniel asked. Gabriel said to him, "God has sent me to minister to you. You were in distress, and you cried out to the Lord. That is how you are here." Daniel asked him, "What is that sound?" "It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, and it seems to be everywhere." Gabriel said to him, "It is the sound of all creation, singing praises to the Lamb of God who was slain, because holy and worthy is he to receive all praise. And so to him be the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen." Daniel said, "I want to see Jesus." Then Gabriel answered him, saying, "Come and see the glory of our God." Suddenly Daniel was taken in the spirit as fast as the twinkling of an eye, and found himself standing before God Almighty. Daniel looked around, and he saw many angels, too many to count, because they were innumerable. The angels, and they that were in the presence of the angels, were shouting with a loud voice, "Holy, holy, holy, Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." The sound was not only in perfect quality, but also perfect quantity. Daniel could not see God's face clearly, because he was clothed in light 10,000 times 10,000 times brighter than the sun, and it was as if he was looking into eternity. Even though his brightness was great and marvelous, it did not hurt his eyes. Daniel was planning to question God, but his heart was overwhelmed by God's eternal love. He said, "Lord, how can you love me? I have sinned against you all my life. I have dishonored you in many ways. I deserve none of this. I deserve hell." But the Lord said to him,
"Daniel, my mercy and grace is sufficient for you."
Immediately Daniel knew as he has known. He knew in just a moment what his purpose was, why he was created, and why he is so valuable to God. God's love flowed through him like waves. Daniel had never felt such joy in his life. He stood there in awe. His mind was completely cleansed of all painful memories. There was nothing on his heart but the unconditional love of God. Daniel said, "I've never felt so loved and fulfilled. Why doesn't everybody want to serve you?" God's love flowed through him again. This time it was stronger. Daniel had an overwhelming desire to worship God, and he did. The Lord said to him,
"Daniel, you are my beloved child. You are and always will be in my arms. I have a commission for you."
Daniel answered him, saying, "Anything, Lord."
"I, Jesus, have sent my angel to minister to you. Go likewise and preach the gospel to all nations, because there are many out there whose souls thirst for the living water and hunger for the bread of life, which of whom is me. I am sending you out as a lamb among wolves, but do not be afraid, for I, the Lord, strong and mighty, will be with you forever. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. I will prepare a place for you here in my Father's house, that where I am, you shall be also. And I will call you by name in the last day of the resurrection of the church, to receive my children to myself."
Daniel said to him, "Send me, Lord. I believe in you. I belong to you, now and forever. I choose now to follow you." As the Lord was sending Daniel back to his body, he heard the voices of angels and the saints of God singing and rejoicing over him for receiving salvation, and another voice praying for him. It was me, his best friend John. As soon as Daniel woke up from his sleep, I told him that he was dead in the hospital for 3 hours. I said, "Dude, God spoke to my heart. He told me to pray for you." Daniel told me that he was in heaven and that he saw Jesus. He told me that I was right about what I told him at church, and that there is a God. He said to me, "God told me that he wants me to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to everybody." I felt the love of God. His heart is an abyss of love. I can't describe what I saw or what I felt, because human words are not able to describe heavenly things. For example, the word beautiful is not even close to describing the least beautiful thing in heaven. I cried out to God just before I got hit by that car, and I realized that if I were to enter heaven and stand before the presence of God in my own strength, I would have melted like wax, worse than what happened to those bad guys in the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I know now that I have the strength through Jesus Christ to face the trials of this life. From this point on, my strength comes from Jesus, and because of him, I can stand before God. Daniel told me that he wanted to buy a new Bible and asked me where he should start reading. I told him to start from the book of John to the book of Revelation. I've never seen my best friend so happy before. Daniel began to understand the Bible and started to spend the rest of his life as a minister and baptized many people in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And he also was baptized. He preached the gospel to everybody he could and told his amazing testimony. It isn't always easy though. A lot of times he is under attack by the devil. He faces persecution all the time because of his passion for Christ, but God has gifted him with a holy boldness to carry on in the faith. Daniel's quick growth in his walk with God has inspired me in great ways and has encouraged me to live a more godly life. As his faith grew, his life finally began to be in order. Him and I both learned that life without God equals calamity, but life with God equals an abundance of joy. Daniel eventually met a beautiful woman named Bailey, who has been a follower of the Lord as well, and I think he is preparing to propose to her very soon. Surely Daniel has been very blessed. God must have really touched his heart. When I said that I saw something in Daniel 20 years ago, this must have been what it was. I see now that God was planning this since the very beginning, before time began. God's plan is indeed perfect. If you haven't made that choice to follow the Lord yet, what are you waiting for? Ask Jesus Christ to come into your life right now. There is no time to waste. The Bible even says it. Romans 10 verse 13. Those who call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. And 2 Corinthians 6:2. For he says, in an acceptable time I have heard you, and in the day of salvation I have helped you. Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day